Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Comics and Variety, Indy Comic stream number 16. I'm your host, Doc Hogg, and over here is our boy,
I'm Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt.
No, I didn't give you permission to do that. But I have to admit, I kind of like it. All righty. Before we get to, we're going to review today. We're going to do. We usually have our guest on first, but Jeremy has to go babysit his little 11-month-old crumb cruncher in about half an hour. So we're going to do the reviews first, and then we are going to, and then we're going to do something. I don't know what just yet.
Bring on Narwhal.
Yeah, bring on Narwhal. Yeah, that guy. Okay. But first, I want to bring up just a quick bit of odd news.
We are. I don't know. I think Doc will be back. I'm not sure. Can't hear him. He's sort of, maybe he just frozen. Maybe that's a thing that happened. Like everyone in the greater DC metro area just froze. Like a special, like an EMP, but for people. I don't know. But I have no doubt he will be here at some point. Well, very little doubt. I don't know. I mean, you never know what's going to happen these days. So people, how you been this past week? Kind of a tough week, but we'll get through it.
It did that last week. Last week you were doing a little promo for Canada Dry Ginger Ale. Did they didn't happen to call and offer some money, did they?
I don't know why not.
I can't imagine either. I mean, our ratings are through the roof. You'd think it's time, but I swear to God. All right, we're gonna try this one more time. And Lord. All righty. Please don't crash. Please don't crash. Please don't crash. All righty. Knocking on Florida couple's door was two alligators fighting. A Florida couple who heard knocking at their front door and looked outside to find a pair of unwelcome visitors, two alligators fighting on their stoop. Sue Geschel said she was home with her husband, Joe, in Fort Myers when they heard banging at their front door. Geschel said Joe looked outside and told her there were some wild visitors at the door. I thought he was joking because we had so much to do and so much on his mind. I thought he was going crazy. Now, imagine if Joe really didn't like his wife. I mean, he'd be like, "Oh, hey, honey, your mom's here. She wants to meet you outside." I mean, wouldn't that be the way to go?
I suppose. Yeah, it's like
right.
What I think that we really need to do, though, is to import some kangaroos from Australia, because they're always fighting in public, right, in the cities, and just have them and the gators fight it out.
Okay, that works. Let's see what the video's like here.
Caught on camera, a little bit of a nightmare. This is the scene a woman found out beside her front door. Kind of a wild day out there. These two 7-foot gators were hissing, caught fighting outside the front door, and this video has gone viral. Wait News reporter Nicole Gabe spoke to the woman about the scary situation.
To see one gator walking near the house is one thing. To see two gators fight is twice as scary. Sue Geschel heard the commotion, but never expected to see what she saw.
All of a sudden there was a loud pounding. And that's when I got involved, because it sounded like somebody was desperate and pounding on my front door and needed some help.
So like any good Facebook friend, Geschel grabbed her phone, hit the video, and then record. She posted this gator battle.
Joe, they're fighting. They're fighting. They're fighting. He just oh my God, they're fighting outside the door.
When your husband said, "Sue, there are alligators."
Okay. I gotta admit, that was kind of awesome. I'd like to actually open my door and see that sometime. Okay. But anyway, which one would you like to review first? LaFay or Jawbreakers?
Let's break some jaws.
All righty. Give me just a second here. All righty.
I should say that we're only reviewing part of a Jawbreakers collection.
Yeah, we're gonna be just doing the God King part of it. Yeah, so let's.
And this is there was a first Jawbreakers collection that included this in it. That was drawn by Kelsey Shannon. This is by Aaron Alfecci, I believe, is the artist on this one.
That is a good question, and I don't even know where my Jawbreakers book is at the moment. But at any rate, I believe that is correct. And this is marginally better than the God King #1 that was actually part of Lost Souls. Lost Souls was a separate story, and Lost Souls wasn't that bad. I actually kind of like that one, but this one, this Jawbreakers, the first one was actually, Richard Myers, from what I understand, his first effort at this. And I just want to run back to the very end of the very first one. There's a scene where they're all kind of stuck in all the Jawbreakers are stuck in the spirit realm, and they've left their bodies, and it says here, psychosurgeon was our way back. His spirit dissipated when his physical body died. We need to get back, but how? And then all of a sudden they're back, and it never explains how they got back inside their bodies. Doesn't explain.
Yeah.
Right. And then there is this final scene. Hold it right there, Silkworm. You and your merry little band of murderers shall not pass. God King sent us. He is as merciful as he is powerful. And then there's some, there's this like kind of emotional scene here where, look, girl, we're roughnecks. We're not serial killers. We don't do trash like that. What if I did? What if I told you I dream of it every night and wake up happy? What would you think about me then? Okay, fine. But here's where it begins. Our team of ex-superheroes.
This is a catch-up thing.
Yeah, a little catch-up thing, but they don't pick up where they left off.
Yeah.
They don't. They do kind of, but they're outside now. They're not back in the room. And how did they get outside? And that emotional moment, never gets resolved.
They just dropped it like it's hot.
Yeah, they decided it was kind of like, let's reboot this thing in the middle of the story. And it's
a bold move, Cotton.
Yeah, it's my main problem with the second one is it's just like every time they need something, the plot needs something, they just kind of throw it in there. It's like, the Latin term deus ex machina, the thing you can't figure out how to resolve the plot. So so the gods come down and fix everything for you,
it's like you just use plot devices rather than actually, plot.
And
so look, I'll say this about the second part of the story. I like Kelsey Shannon's art in the first one. I like what we think is Aaron Alfecci's art in this one a little bit better.
I do too.
Kelsey Shannon is sometimes really great. In Nora's Saga, I think he's just completely on point. I don't think he was as on his game in the first half of this. He was fine, but not great. I think Aaron Alfecci does a very good job of drawing a story that has problems.
Yeah, I think that's fair, but for example, they need to shoot this thing called the God Gun, and to kill the God King. And they have Hell Priest, the character Hell Priest, has the God Gun. And then did I leave this? Did I put this one upside down? I'm sorry.
I just turned my computer upside the other way around.
No. Oh yeah, here. There we go.
There you go.
Yeah, and God, now I got to go back because it jumps around a lot too. It's not you got a rebreather in that mask. Yes. Why? We're going for a little dip in the reservoir. And then they finally, we go through all this stuff here, and they go into the reservoir, and they find some giant robot that they had defeated years ago, and now they're going to use it to confront the God King, who's in his own robot. And then Knife Hand, this character Knife Hand, shows up, and he takes the gun, and he shoots the God King. I think he shoots the God King's robot open, and it's just, every little plot device, like you said, every little plot device you need, and he ends up. That was the other thing. He knew that the God King wasn't actually a god at this point, because the amount of petals. He says that, at the beginning they lost their weapons because the God King turned all their weapons into flower petals. And he says here, but I almost instinctively, I reached my hand out and grabbed the petals that made up my pistol and counted them. The amount of petals is the same as the number of parts in a gun. Why? The same reason a god needs a suit of armor, or the 30-store tall mech. Because he's a man, which means I can kill you. And then he kills him, but then it turns out he needed to be killed to become a god, which the gun components and rose petals being the same number was too technical. Nothing god. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Nothing godlike. It just,
Well, this story is a train wreck.
Yeah, it is.
And it's not like you couldn't have spent a lot of time and kind of, you would have needed twice as many pages probably to do what he was trying to do.
Yeah.
You would have needed an editor who would say, Richard, come on, let's come up with a better explanation, et cetera, et cetera. Like the petals thing might make sense to someone who has OCD, but most of us, not so much. It just didn't. There are other parts of Jawbreakers that are better than this. But I think that the God King story from what I read in the first collection, I was like, please don't continue, but they did.
Yeah.
I don't. We'll look into other parts of this later, but this particular part of it, it had pretty artwork.
Yeah, I agree. The artwork is good, but the story is not, and it's just. I just want to get to this last part here. Not even something in the comic book, but I was looking at Deadwood Dale's piece video the other day, and he was saying that Lost Souls, did around 400,000 in business, and he was saying the reason it dropped to 250 during God King was that he thought that some people had who were maybe politically motivated, in the sense that, oh hey, this was the first one, Lost Souls, was kind of a way of saying screw you to the SJWs, and so he lost some of that business the second time round, which may be part of it. But in the Lost Souls compilation, you get the first issue of God, or the first part of God King in it. I think the part of the reason is that people looked at the first God King, which had tons of problems in it, and said, they weren't they like, why would I want the second one? So I think that's probably got something to do with it as well. And but what can you say? These are his first efforts, and if Iron Sights is any indication, he's getting better and better. So alrighty, so I think that's enough on that. Why don't we move over to LaFay now?
Okay.
Which I actually quite liked.
Yeah, so obviously Richard is still setting up. Basically, it's a long setup for Jawbreakers, and as you see in part of a God King, not the greatest setup. This is a setup. This is a much more compact setup, and we're going to talk about what we thought of that. I think.
Yeah, we might. You never know. Okay. All righty. Yeah. LaFay, and this is by is it Michael Dupree or is
Marcel Dupree
and Josh Metzger, right?
Those are the co-creators, writers, and then what's the first name of Ruiz? He's the artist, I believe.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about this since this was your choice?
Okay. Yeah, this is Evoluzioni's No Sleep label, which is slightly more adult than some of their. They have like a young adult imprint as well.
Mhm.
This is Morgan Le Fay in Miss, the myth of the King Arthur, etc. And she was defenestrated, I guess you'd say, back in the day. Just got it handed to her by Merlin, and he put her into this deep sleep, and she's been woken up these days by these three witches who want her to kind of go around and figure things out for her. She's got a little bit of like a detective. She does not have very many of the abilities that she had back in the day when she was Queen of the Fae. And she's, got a little, what is he? He's not a leprechaun, but she's a little helper with her. And they are trying to figure out who killed these people.
It was a hobgoblin.
Hobgoblin. There we go.
Yeah.
And she's not a good person, and she tells you that. She says, "I am not a good person."
But yeah, she was basically trying to become the ruler of,
everything.
Under when I think King Arthur had died, or whoever it was that had died, and she tried to eliminate Merlin. Merlin defeats her and puts her into a sleep and
her wings off, messing her up good.
Yeah.
And then, cut forward to the future. She's waking up in some guy's apartment and not sure where she put her clothes, and then being called into service of these witches to go look into a case.
Yeah. And here is, it turns out who it was that killed the, you have to forgive me, every so often these little hands end up in my screenshots because unfortunately the arrow, the pointer here got left, so they show up every once in a while. I hate that, but at any rate, and I believe it's Jack Spratt, isn't it? Who's the murderer?
No, it's Jack Spring-Heeled Jack, I believe.
Spring-Heeled Jack, that's right. And at any rate, they're investigating and they find this cage, and they're kind of wondering what's a cage doing here. These monkeys, these little the people that were killed are raising these special kind of these shug monkeys, and the shug monkeys are out in the open. They're all over the house. Yeah. And so what's there a cage here? And they find some scale that looks like it's some kind of reptile. And they what was the name of the skull again?
Isn't it called like the Screaming Skull or something?
Yeah, the Screaming Skull, and they use it to try to determine exactly what it was or who it was that killed them, and
it'll tell them things, but it hates them and wants them dead, and so will yell at them the whole time.
Yeah, and the hobgoblin is gets a little overwhelmed by it. Spring-Heeled Jack, and at any rate, toward the end, we get a look at whoever it's Spring-Heeled Jack and whoever is. Actually wants this this little creature, and Spring-Heeled Jack is saying, well, we're going to negotiate again. I want more than the $500,000 we agreed on because I didn't realize exactly what this was, and the henchman here ducks down, hopes the other two will shoot him, and it just in this is actually pretty good. I mean, you get a sense of how powerful this Jack Spratt is, in that he looks up and he's like, oh shit. Yeah. And Spratt is basically just taking these things apart like like pieces of paper almost. Yeah. And So he tells them, you know, go back and tell your guy that you know, I want 10 million. And then there's this final splash page here that is this is actually pretty nice. You know, a pretty good splash page. You know, Sprat's claws out there, and there's something, you know, there's something inside there with these glowing eyes. Looks kind of fiendish. So yeah, overall, I mean, this is you know, I'll say this, I do really want to see what happens next.
Indeed. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a really, really good first issue.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a way to, you know, they've set it all up. There's nothing muddled about it. They're juggling a lot here, but not too much. You know, textbook. This is how you do it.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see. Anything else about this?
I love the glowing eyes there.
Yeah, the glowing eyes are really nice. I mean,
you know what's behind those eyes.
Yeah, and also I think LaFay and the Hobgoblin, they have some chemistry with each other. That's one other thing was missing from Jawbreaker's God King, and it's kind of missing from all the Jawbreakers, is there's not really a lot of chemistry in the team. I mean, they don't play off each other very well, and that just makes them less interesting. And I'm kind of glad that I'm hoping he's moving on from Jawbreaker. Sorry to be going back to that, but
That's all right.
it's just something that, you know, I was just reminded of. So yeah, I mean, it works overall. This works very, very well.
Yeah, I just you know, I was very impressed with this opening. It did what I want a comic book to do.
Mm-hmm.
It took me somewhere else. It showed me a different world. You know, it amused me. It made me laugh. And it made me curious.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And but then, you know, you get these previews, and Jeremy, you are an utter degenerate that you would give me a comic book that has this in it. Ah! Just degeneracy. Absolute degeneracy. You should be ashamed of yourself. Absolutely ashamed of yourself.
You know, comic books are a little scandalous sometimes.
Ah! Just degenerate. So we're waiting for Narwhal to come back now. We've gotten through the reviews. So
yeah,
let me just tell everyone here just what we are going to be talking about. Yeah, and with Narwhal, and yeah, a couple other quick things here. Yeah, there's Narwhal's book Foreign Agent, and if you read I want to say Downcast, but that was somebody else's. Oh boy. Gosh darn it, what was Narwhal's first book that we so liked? We so enjoyed.
Problem is I had it in my head and then you knocked it out with Downcast.
Yeah, it was Earthbound is what it was. Yeah. Earthbound, that's what it was. Very, very enjoyable comic. Very weird, but in a weird, delightful way.
Foreign Agent, I've seen two different versions, an early version of this and a later version. There was so much improvement between the two versions, it's not even funny. Now, it's not to say that the early version didn't have a lot of goodness to it. I very enthusiastically back this, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the final looks like. It's a unique story. It's kind of his take on a Western, but you know, not obviously set in a Western setting. You know, Narwhal does things that no one else does these days, and you know, I always look forward to what he comes up with next.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry I can't stick around and talk with him because you know, he's a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, I've been on his show twice, and he's very very helpful, and yeah, just all around seems like a good man. So
he's used to have that mask on all the time, but apparently, like, he was on one show and very, very drunk, and they convinced him that like his mask was on fire, and he's like pulled it off. That was his reveal.
Do you remember which show that was? I'd like to find it.
I've been told this happened. Okay, but and I was in one of his on his shows, I jumped into chat and I'm like, so when did this happen? And people were telling me that, they convinced him that like he needed to take this off in a hurry. And thus he is now, he's like a Superman. Now that we know, he Brian Michael Bendis himself.
All righty. Well, he's actually back. He's back in the green room. Let me just finish this up. This is his campaign for an agent. It is currently in demand. And also just need to mention my comic book Tilt. It is now only $45 away from its $4,000 stretch goal. And you'll get two pinups included with your order if we hit the stretch goal. And so only $45 away. Back it as soon as you can. And let me now bring in.
I gotta go, but I'm gonna say something.
All right.
$45 make Doc Holla.
What the? Bye, Jeremy.
See you, Jeremy.
How are you, sir? Now, Jeremy was telling me before you came in here that you used to wear a mask on shows, but on one show you had a little too much to drink and someone told you it was burning and that was your reveal. Is that true?
I can't remember if it's exactly that, but yeah, I was wearing masks just because it was kind of, the kayfabe was fun, but I would actually get made fun of kind of a lot for it. And then I kind of just slowly quit doing it because Ethan was kind of encouraging me not to wear a mask, and Malin, both of them. And then, but the one episode I had where I was too drunk that's kind of infamous was when the chat convinced me at my old apartment, there's a closet behind me, and I went to go pee, and they told me that someone was in the house with me because when I went to pee, a lady walked from the closet to the front door of my bedroom, and I believed them. So like they really got me. And it was weird. I was like, I totally believed him because I was a dumb drunk guy, but yeah.
All right. Okay. Before we get to your campaign, a couple of quick things. I just wanted, I'm bringing back a feature that's called No Square, and I'll just give me just a second here, and I'll bring this up. Now, the last time I did this earlier, and for some reason, my browser booted me. So you may be alone on the show here for about 30 seconds. So hang on here. Let's hope this works. And
okay.
Oh, yes, it does. Okay, here is the intro to No Square.
Stop! Don't touch me there. This is my no square. Stop! Don't touch me there. This is my no square. Stop! Don't touch me there. This is my no square. Stop! Don't touch me there. This is my no square.
Alrighty, No Square is well, it's basically a piece of comic book art that I take from the mainstream that is, I think, a utter joke. It is I take one panel and it is our No Square. And here it is. Dear God in heaven, what is that?
That's funny.
This is from the X-Men #1 of Nightcrawler, and it's another one of those one-off things, so it's not actually #1 in a series. It's just your usual little scheme and scam that the
So this is modern.
Yeah, this is modern. This was one of the things that I bought this recently, and I'm like looking at this thing and I'm like, oh my God, what the hell is that?
Yeah, that's funny.
And that gave me nightmares for a while. So, all right, let's move on to your book. Do you want me to bring up your screen, or do you want to share your screen, or
I'll share, I guess. Let me see.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So here's the campaign page. Foreign Agent launched it a couple months ago. It's doing well. I'm in the process of fulfillment, so I'm talking to the printer. I think they're going to send me the proofs. Pretty sure they're going to send them this week. It's like right at that point though, which is nice. And after that they get approved, and then it takes a couple months when you get like a bunch of books come to your house and you got to send them all out. It's this big process, but it's pretty fun. And it's just going like, smoothly. So that continues on. And then the book itself is 190 pages, graphic novel. It's kind of cinematic. My books get called cinematic, which can be a positive or a negative depending on how you look at it. I kind of think it's okay as long as you do it good. Like modern Marvel does like that cinematic feel where it's just people sitting around a table talking and eating food, and they call that, it's too cinematic. It's just like storyboards, flat angles, blah blah blah. I'm like, I get that, like that's terrible, but this is not like that. It's kind of like watching an animated movie is almost like reading my my comics. And this is the second book after Earthbound, so anyone who's read Earthbound kind of knows my style a little bit.
Now you do the art in addition to the story?
Yeah, I do all the art and the story. On this project I had some collaborators because there's like art within the art. So it's these two soldiers come to this house and there's a language barrier in the house. The only way they can communicate is through drawings. So the young soldier draws and then the young boy of the house draws. And I hired two artists to represent their art within the book. And also, because it all takes place in one house, the house is like a 3D model. And I had a friend make that for me, so he gets credit too.
Tell me, how do you come up with your story ideas? Because Earthbound was one of the most unusual. I think I described it as weird, but in an incredibly enjoyable way. I opened it to the first 2 pages. I'm like, what the hell is this? And then about 6 pages in, I was hooked. And it's one of those rare graphic novels that I really did not want to put down at any point. I mean, how do you come up with that kind of an idea?
Yeah, thank you. So for that one, I think a little bit of it was, it kind of was having the concept of combining two genres that don't normally get combined. And the ones I had in mind were like space opera, kind of like almost like Star Wars or Guardians of the Galaxy, combined with like John Hughes teen sex comedy kind of thing. And those two put together, a lot of people kind of feel that originality and they like it. And then I don't know, on top of that, it does kind of a nice balance with the world building versus the kind of simple story. So it's like complicated world building, but simple story. Those two things combined to kind of help it drive pretty quickly. And people kind of like that, I think.
Now, how did you start getting the idea for this one in particular?
So this one, I was a little bit different origin story, but I was visiting my buddy. His name's Louis Dorge. I almost call him like my mentor. He's a little bit older than me. He's like a filmmaker, and I wrote some scripts with him in my 20s. And so we live in different states. So I visited him for like a couple of weeks. I was crashing on his couch, and he has a huge DVD collection. And he's like, you got to check out some Monty Hellman Westerns. You might find them inspiring. And those are those super low budget Westerns. Like they take place either in one house or not even in a house. It's just people on horses in the desert or whatever. And there's actually 2 of them, I think, that are famous. And they both have Jack Nicholson in them. That's kind of a little claim to fame. So I watched both those, and I just got this idea right away where it was like, this kind of low budget idea. Because at that point I was thinking of it doing it as a movie. So I was conceptualizing it to be low budget. So I was thinking in my head, I was like, I want one location, minimal characters, but it still has to be entertaining. And I had this idea for the language barrier communicating with art was like my kind of twist on it. And then I realized later, I was like, because the script kind of just sat there, and I realized like a couple years later, I was like, this should be a comic, because then I can really do the art within the art, the comic within a comic kind of thing. And I was curious if they would translate like the low budget movie style. You make a comic of it. With comics, usually you don't have to worry about that at all. You can make it a $10 billion budget if you want, because you're just drawing everything. But what you get is it does kind of stand out, feel a little bit rare and interesting if you do that, because no one else really does that. So then for the most part. So then you get this kind of low budget cinematic comic, but still it has this art within the art kind of concept that can only be told best through a comic anyway. So those are some of the kind of interesting things about it that hooked me on it, made me want to work on it.
So does most of this comic actually take place within the house? I mean, is there very little? I know there's one scene where you see the two soldiers walking through the snow, but are you taking that Monty Hellman kind of approach of centering it in, one area? Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. It's all pretty much just the house. And then the main like kind of point of intrigue, there's a couple little ones, but they're surprisingly like they work pretty well, even though they're pretty simple. But the main one is the family. It's a young boy, a pretty young girl, and an old man. And it's the two soldiers. And the two soldiers can't figure out if the young girl is the old man's daughter or like a very young wife. And then if the boy is her son or her really young brother. And depending on the answers to those questions, like they might have a different feeling about the family. So like, especially if the girl's like a really young wife, the one soldier is not really into that. He's kind of like, kind of what's it called? Like moral relative. He's not a moral relativist. He thinks
traditionalist.
He thinks it's wrong. And the other one is a moral relativist, and he thinks they shouldn't rock the boat. It's just the culture of this family, whatever it is, the answer doesn't matter. And so tensions kind of start to rise based on like if they came into a house where there already was like an abusive situation or not, and then what they should do about that if they find out that that's the case.
Okay. Now, where does your art style come from? I mean, because it's pretty unique among not just Comicsgate, but kind of comics in general. I mean, how did you develop that, and who were your influences?
Yeah, thank you. Or good question. My influences are very European, and then how it developed, like specifically like Moebius and Bengal is a French dude I really like, and there's an Italian guy kind of modern named LRNZ, pronounced Lorenzo, that I really like, and there's a French comic called Last Man that got turned into an animated TV show that I like. And then like I've always just liked how 2D animation looked, so I kind of had that idea going in that I was like, it'd be cool if my panels just kind of looked like frames of animation. I wouldn't really mind that. And I know sometimes, like especially in America, like animation doesn't have line weight usually. And in America, they really like line weight, and for some reason,
tell us what line weight is. Although I suspect people watching probably know, but just let us know what that is.
Yeah, it's just like when you get the thick to thin brush strokes with the ink lines. So, for example, with this drawing that's on the screen now, it's all the same size line, and it kind of gives it that animation feel, even though. Like if you did this exact same drawing but with line weight, it honestly might look a little better. But I just like the feel of this more in some ways because of that animation callback. And then so the other big kind of part of how the style developed was basically from my first big gig. It's called Machete Squad, and on that one I'm not the writer, I'm just the artist. And I got that job kind of lucky by being in the right place at the right time. Just at a comic convention, a journalist who had been working with a Afghanistan medic, like an American who was served in Afghanistan, came back. He had these memoirs that he had written down. They were converting them into a graphic novel, and they had a book deal, but their artist fell through. So they needed to find someone fast. So they asked me, and that's one of the things they said. They said, can you do 120 pages? Can you color it, draw it, color it, and letter it all in 1 year? And I said, yes. And then I wasn't actually sure. So then that process of doing that, kind of trial by fire, kind of forced me to develop a pretty fast style. And some of these shortcuts kind of became that I became comfortable with. That kind of became a big part of my style, which is kind of back to the American versus European. Like I rely a lot more on color to hold the form and to show the form of the characters, or in this case, tone, or gray tone or whatever, rather than ink lines. Like you could do it with cross hatching, black fills, the shape of the lines, the thickness, that all could help create form and stuff. But I don't do any of that. I do it all in the coloring phase. It saves me a lot of time. And so a page for me, it still takes kind of a long time, and it takes longer in different weird ways. Like I do a lot of Control-Z, I do all digitally, so I'm undoing a lot of strokes, and I might redraw each stroke 10 times and then like that one and leave it. But it still goes much faster, especially if you compare it to like a workflow where you have like someone like 8 hours on the pencils, 8 hours on the inks, 8 hours on the colors or something like that. I don't do that. It's like, for me, it's about like 8 hours to do one page. So yeah, doing it all basically.
All right. Wow. Now, what got you into comics, and kind of what drove you to become an artist? How did that? Tell us your life. Tell us your life story.
Yeah, good question. I was a senior in high school, and maybe like a junior, senior, I got into screenwriting and a little bit into comics. My senior project was a comic book, and I wrote it and drew it myself and printed it out. I forget how many pages it was. It was maybe 22, and I printed it out, photocopied on 11 by 17 huge sheets that were unstapled. I just threw them in big bags, and I might have sold like 50 to 100 copies to my friends around the school for like $5 each. And so that was kind of fun, but also it's kind of funny because that comic is terrible, like terrible writing, terrible art. The art's a little bit better than the writing. The writing especially is super cringy. That's one thing I've kind of learned is like, it doesn't matter where you start as long as you stick with it, because then you can be a decent writer way later.
I would have been disastrous at this, had I done it when I was a high schooler. So yeah, I mean, I didn't start finding my writing prowess until I was in my mid-20s. So
yeah, that's kind of how I feel too. And a lot of that early writing is just there to kind of get it out of the way so you can move on to some of the better stuff. Some of it too is like, if you just mature as a person, that can help. Like, so it's not like if you start late, you might start way ahead than I was as like an immature 18-year-old. But so then I went to animation school for a little bit. I actually dropped out after a few quarters because it was too expensive, and then kind of went to regular art college. And that was it. I sort of regret that, but it's a different time now than it was then, where now I especially wouldn't do that if I knew what I knew then that I know now, like that all the great education stuff you can get just online and through networks like Comicsgate, way more effective than going to art school, where it can actually in some ways work the opposite direction. But so my degree was basically useless, but I was just drawing. I was writing a lot of scripts, drinking a lot of beer with my friends in my 20s, and then drawing off and on a lot, but more of a writer for up until like I was 27 or so. And then I ended up paying rent and buying food for 2 or 3 years just by checking Craigslist on LA for creative gigs every morning. And I did a bunch of storyboarding, but it's all budget. None of it's like high profile romantic stuff. It was all just like, kind of like a bunch of crap that didn't even pay that well. But for some reason, there was a lot of that kind of work. So I was super poor for that period, but kind of just got by doing it. And then got that first comic gig, and kind of right around there at the time I was 30 was like when I made that decision. I was like, I need to start working on some big comic projects, because if I don't, I'll kind of miss this opportunity to even do that. And I have some material, like some written material, that I had a bunch of scripts that were not good, and then I had a couple that I thought were okay. One of them was Earthbound. And so I was like, I can start working on this as a comic. And so that was kind of the point when I turned 30. But my 20s, like a little bit of this, little bit of that, pages here and there. I think by the time I started Earthbound, I might have drawn like 200 or 300 pages of random comic false starts here and there, trying to get published here and there, and having no luck. And I never really had any luck. It's kind of, the timing of Comicsgate was great that they were around. So I was able to find a environment where I can actually see some success, and to some degree it feels a little meritocratic, where like the work you put in, you'll get something back out. Whereas before it's like banging your head on a wall and you literally get nothing. And that felt really weird. I was getting kind of bitter and pissed, and I'm still a little like angry, but I'm just also happy and grateful for Comicsgate in general.
Yeah. No, I get the bitterness stuff. I mean, I've had a long career as not as a screenwriter, but as a reporter and political writer. And I put tons of effort into a book that I wrote that came out 5 years ago, and then it flopped like a whale turd. So and you put a lot. I mean, I'm talking years into that thing. So I understand the bitterness experience, but you just at some point you just kind of have to move on and say, there's lots of lessons I can learn out of it. And one of the things I learned was that, it's hard to get sales unless you have some kind of a platform. People who make big sales in the political realm usually have a syndicated column or, a steady column where they, draw in people and then they put it in their column. Oh, I got a book, and, the sales take off. Anyway, that was a good lesson, though, to take to the comic book thing.
Yeah, that definitely carries over.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about, you're going to have Earthbound 2 sometime later this year. Is that correct?
Yeah, in the fall. That's what I'm working on mostly right now is Earthbound 2.
Now, do you what do you have planned after that? I mean, do you have other story ideas in the pipeline, or?
Yeah, so kind of because of Comicsgate 2, some of this stuff is kind of fun that what's developing, but like this combined with Earthbound, both were kind of successful enough that I have a little bit of budget that I can invest if I want. I don't know, it's almost like $6,000 or something I could spend just on comics if I want to hire people. And so I've kind of been thinking about that kind of money and where to invest it back into the community with some projects. And one of the things is I hired a co-writer to help me write a feature script there'll be a graphic novel script adaptation of 2 shorts that I wrote. And the shorts are called The Naked Samurai. And that's in the back of Earthbound. And that's like about like this legendary samurai who's always naked. And then there's this guy wwho just walks around naked pretending to be the legendary guy because it makes his life easier.
Sounds degenerate.
Yeah, it's kind of like a comedy. I don't think there'll be full frontal nudity in it. I'm not sure how we'll handle that exactly. But so we're writing that, and we're doing a lot of it live brainstorming on my channel. And that's going to be like a big script when it's done. And that'll be one of my future projects that I'll have to jump into that'll take like a year to draw. And I have one backed up script that I haven't drawn yet. That's like, that one's about a dog. So it's like a dog book, like 101 Dalmatians, but it's like the dog's master gets murdered by a dog. So the dog is trying to find out who killed his master. So it's like dog versus dog. He's like a detective kind of. And
wow. All right. Well, tell us about some of the perks here, or the tiers on your campaign. What's still available? How long have you been in demand on this one now?
I think it's been like almost 2 months.
Okay.
Yeah, and it'll stay in demand even when I'm fulfilling, because I noticed with Earthbound there was a huge influx of sales from word of mouth once you start mailing it out. So it's for anyone listening, it's a good idea to buy extras in case that happens, And so I'm hoping, or just want that possibility to be available to me. So this will stay in demand kind of probably all the way through the summer.
Boy, I just ordered the comic books for Tilt. I sure wish I'd had you on the show about 2 weeks ago.
Oh yeah. How many, what percentage extra did you order?
Not enough, if that's going to
happen. Yeah. Because that will happen. Right, you'll get some demand and supply kind of thing. And then you could eventually just do a second offer kind of soon after ish. People can do that, but
yeah, well, I'll just have to reorder it. It's fine. It's not a big deal, but so.
Oh yeah,
it is what it is. There's just certain things in this, and there's just certain things you're going to learn the hard way. You can go out and try and get all the advice you want, and you're going to miss things, and even things that seem in retrospect obvious. It's like, oh God, how did I miss that? Well, you do, and it's a big learning. It's a big learning curve, and you just got to climb it.
Yeah. So for perks, I just have the standard book for $25, and keep in mind that's like a full graphic novel. So the page wise, this is one of the better deals in Comicsgate. Then the hardcover, which is $40 plus shipping, same exact book, same cover, just hardcover. For those, there's only 500 total. Like it says 300, but there's some other ways it comes combined with different tiers. So those are extra limited editions. I did the same with Earthbound, and it kind of sold out. Those have good demand. People tend to like and respond to like the value that might hold just because of the limited edition kind of thing. And the total print run for both Earthbound and Foreign Agent, it's 2,000. So that's kind of something to keep in mind too, is like the entire first print run is 2,000, which is kind of low and fun to get in on that kind of ground level, especially if the prices are at competing with Amazon. kind of prices.
Mhm.
And then there's the bulk. You can get 3 of them for a little bit off. There's the Jeff Lastly original painting. This is a good one that it hasn't sold yet, so I might pimp that a little bit. But I commissioned him to do a painting for me, and here it is. It looks great. And I was kind of thinking in my head, I was like, if it sells, I might commission another, and if it doesn't sell, I'll just put it on my wall. So it's like a win-win. But it's up and it's available if anyone wants to back it. I'm kind of curious if it will sell before the end of the campaign or not. And yeah, the hardcover plus the sketchbook sold out quickly too. About the sketchbooks, I'll say Earthbound had a sketchbook tier also. It's a 48-page black and white square bound comic that includes a handful of shorts and some sketches. And the shorts, the biggest short it includes is there's a 60-page short that I did of Nosferatu that is split up into 3 parts. So part 1 is in the Earthbound sketchbook, part 2 is in the Foreign Agent sketchbook, and part 3 will be in the Earthbound part 2 sketchbook. So if anyone wants those, like that Nosferatu story, get the sketchbook tiers. Eventually I'm going to do a campaign that just combines all the sketchbooks into one campaign, and it'll kind of just be like the Narwhal compendium of short comics. And one of them will be Nosferatu. One of them will be the Naked Samurais 1 and 2, because I have 2 of those. Maybe I'll draw a 3rd in the meantime.
Cool.
But yeah, that's the idea.
All right. Final question before we wrap up here. Why did you choose to name yourself after a whale?
Yeah, there is a story behind that. So I was collaborating with a writer in my 20s. It was Louis Dorge's sister. Her name's Hannah Dorge. And for that project, we're like, we should come up with like a fake name for our company. And so we're like, well, let's just both think of a word and combine both the words, and that'll be our company. So my word was basketball and her word was narwhal. So our company was Basketball Narwhal. And I eventually just dropped the basketball because I liked her name. Her word was better than mine.
I see. Okay. Well, very good. Very good. I like it. Okay. Well, why don't you just give us a quick wrap up and anything else you want to say, and then we'll end this.
Cool. Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. It's nice to kind of be quick and get the good information out there quick, and people have everything they need. If they want to back it, they will. They can check it out. The video is pretty cool too. We don't have to watch it now, but I'll encourage anyone who's curious about it. Check it out. It has.
We've got a few minutes. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, let's watch it then. Let me see if I can. I think my audio's on, so it should work.
Yeah, it is.
So some of this full animation, you know. I'm trying to get better at animation, but it's kind of a side thing I'm doing in the background. Might eventually want to try and dabble in some real animation, but it's still kind of amateurish, but it's pretty fun. And again, this, like, people did kind of like the video and it helped sales, and I don't know.
Yeah.
All right.
No, I mean, I don't want to spoil anything in the book. I would say the last, it does build, the tension builds, and the last 80 pages or so, 60 pages or so get very, very intense. I mean, you bring things to a boil with all these different characters. Foreign Agent, you feel from the beginning. I mean, and in fact, the way you set up the story of these soldiers kind of making their way across the snow feels like they're running from something. It's not good. Their situation isn't good. By the time you hit, page 7, you're feeling tense.
Outstanding.
Cool. That's
Outstanding. All righty. Well, thank
Yeah.
you very much for coming on the show and sharing this with us. Wish you all the luck. And yeah, I can't. I'm looking forward to getting this, and I'm definitely looking forward to Earthbound too. And yeah, if you haven't backed this yet, you really should. And if you don't, I'll guarantee you're going to be missing out. So. All righty. Thank you, sir, for being on the show. And thank you, everyone, all our audience who showed up. And we will be back next week. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Doc Hogg.
You're welcome.